Today, my sister and I are gonna go into town and I think we're gonna go to Joann's. She wants to get some yarn. She's making a sleeve for my iPad and I'm really excited for it. I wanted to go somewhere, but I don't really remember. Honestly, I just need to get out of the house. But yeah, my sister had the day off, so we're gonna go just run some girl errands and kind of hang out a bit. And then later today, I am going up north to see my cousins and spend Thanksgiving with them. So around 4 o'clock, I will be with my older sister and she's gonna be driving us. And I get to see my little baby niece, which is exciting. This is also my first family Thanksgiving back home, like in 3 years, because my brother and I didn't visit for Thanksgiving when we lived in Omaha because it was usually snowing. But anyway, I'm really excited to spend Thanksgiving with them because it's been a while. So I need to pack and get some stuff around because I'm making homemade rolls. I'm a little nervous about that because my family is very, I would say, traditional. They're not necessarily picky, but we've been doing this Thanksgiving since we were infants. So it's kind of a big deal that everything is a certain way. So it's honestly a little bit controversial to make homemade rolls. One year, I asked if we should warm up the Hawaiian rolls and they flamed me. So I'm taking a risk, but I think it's worth it. Anyway, I am going to spend some time with God and maybe I can let you know my thoughts on what I read today. Yeah, I'll see you in a bit. Okay. Finished reading. My cats are being so cuddly. Juniper is behind the camera, but usually she's sleeping under the blankets. But yeah, it's really sweet. I was reading in Exodus. I just started Exodus yesterday or the day before. I finished Genesis, which, like, let me tell you, before I went on my trip, I hadn't like ever read the Bible before. And while I was on my trip for a year, this Christian mission trip, I still barely read my Bible. And I'm not really sure why. I honestly really struggled in the environment because it was very religious and kind of felt a little suffocating at times. But when I got home from my trip, I decided that I would try to read the Bible every day. And so I read Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And then I decided to jump into the Old Testament. The Old Testament was always kind of scary to me because I was worried that everything that I learned about God in the New Testament would seem to contradict in a way. And I'm not sure why I thought that, because scripture says that God is the same today, yesterday, and every day, you know. So realistically, I know that he doesn't change, but I was still like the Old Testament is scary and harsh and like God like kills a bunch of people and all this stuff. And you know, yeah, Genesis was a wild ride. It really felt like I was reading like reality TV because the stuff that people were getting into was crazy. And to me, it really just showed God's character and how loving and kind he is, because, you know, I mean, like the way that people deal with people is an eye for an eye, you know, and that's definitely something that is used out of context from the Bible all the time, is the eye for an eye. And you know, Jesus said that's not what we're doing here. Like, we're not out to get each other. But unfortunately, that's the way that the world works. It's like, if we are done wrong, you know, we think that we need to go after the other person or whatever, or withhold kindness or love and things like that, because if someone has hurt us, they don't deserve love and kindness and everything, you know. And that's like obviously a normal human feeling. Like, when someone hurts my feelings, like, I don't want to shower them with love, but that's what God does for us. And when I'm reading in Genesis and stuff, and I'm reading about all the terrible things that these people were doing and how God still kept his promise with them, you know, he didn't change his mind. He wasn't like, you know what, you don't get to have this thing that I promised because you're being naughty, you know. He really said, I love you anyway, and my kindness and my goodness and my character is not dependent on what you do and, you know, right or wrong. Like, I'm going to do this for you because I love you. And I said I would. And that's really reassuring, you know, in my life, and hopefully in your life too, is that God's love is not dependent on your character. It's dependent on his character. He's going to love you because he loves you. You don't have to do everything right or everything well. He's just gonna love you. And I think that's so beautiful and reassuring. But yeah, I've just been honestly enjoying the Old Testament, which is crazy because I never thought I would, because I thought it was so boring. But it's actually low-key so much tea, and it's so interesting. So I don't know, if you relate and you've not ever tried to read the Old Testament, maybe you can give it a try, and I would love to talk about it. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I don't know everything, but I like to discuss, you know, different perspectives and things like that, because ultimately I think it helps us get a more clear view of who God is. And that's honestly my goal in life, is to just get to know God more and know his heart more. So yeah, Genesis was a lot about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all, like, basically the first family, and like all their trials and the things that they promised. And I think something that I am learning about is the will of God, because during my trip, it seemed that a lot of people believed that God's will for your life is very, very specific, and you are to figure it out exactly what it is, but he won't tell you. He's not going to tell you anything. And it was really hard for me to understand that, like, why God would have such a specific will for my life and also not tell me about it. Like, that seemed kind of mean to me. It just doesn't seem like his character, you know? So I had noticed, you know, after my trip and during, that I started to really struggle making decisions, and especially being home now that I actually have the freedom to make choices, I noticed that I was like very anxious about the choices that I make. And it was never about every little thing, like, okay, God, like, what should I wear today? Okay, like, what should I eat? Okay, what should I do? And I asked God about some things, like my tithes, because I set aside my tithes every paycheck, and I like to, you know, give to people in my area, you know, if I can, and if I see a need, like, I want to support it. So sometimes I'll ask him and run it by him and be like, okay, like, what should I do? And, you know, I think that's okay. And he likes to talk to us and listen to us. So anything that I talk to him about, like, he's gonna be like, okay, like, yeah, I'm here. Like, he's my best friend, you know? But I started to get really anxious about, like, everything, you know? And, like, what job should I have? Where should I live? You know? I've been thinking about moving back to Omaha with my brother. You know, I'm sitting here thinking, like, well, I don't know what God wants me to do. I don't know if he's gonna be okay with that. And yeah, like, this has been a decision that's been on my mind for months and months. And it's like, you know, I'm like, I was waiting for God to give me an answer, and I kept feeling like he was like, I'm not gonna tell you, and not in a way of like, well, I know what you should do, but I'm not gonna tell you, but in a way that's like, you can make your own decisions, you know? And so, but I still wasn't sure, because, you know, I had this mindset that, like, God's will is so specific, and I don't want to miss what he has for me, and I don't want to choose the wrong thing and, you know, go through all this drama because, oh, like, I'm out of the will of God. And I just never had peace. So I started reading this book. It's called Just Do Something by Kevin DeYoung, and it talks about the will of God and how the will of God is something that we kind of use in 3 different ways. So it's like the sovereign will of God, God's desired will, and then his directional will. And the book really explains the difference between those. So God's sovereign will is basically like, God gets his way no matter what. And luckily for us, God is so loving. His way is ultimately better for us anyway. And so when I was reading in Genesis, an example of this is with Joseph. He had dreams when he was younger that he would be above his brothers and that his brothers would bow down to him, I believe. And his brothers got really insecure and jealous, and they didn't want that to happen. So they decided that they were going to throw him in a well. They were going to kill him. Then they changed their mind and they sold him as a slave instead. So, you know, the dream that Joseph had was from God. So God's sovereign will for Joseph was that he would be above his brothers and they would bow down to him. And obviously that's the surface level version of it, but that was God's sovereign plan for Joseph's life. And it didn't matter what Joseph did, and it didn't matter what his brothers did. You know, they sold into slavery, and it didn't matter because God was going to get his way no matter what. So Joseph gets sold into slavery in Egypt, and he goes to prison, is in prison, but he interprets Pharaoh's dream and is exalted and is brought to rule Egypt with Pharaoh, like basically like their, you know, right-hand man situation. You know, I think that that's such a good example of God's sovereign will, because everything was against Joseph. Like, everything was against him and his dreams and God's promise coming true, but it still came true because God's sovereign will and God's will, like, is going to happen. Like, God's will be done, you know? And so for me, that brings a lot of peace, and hopefully for you as well, that you don't have to figure it out, and life can look really messy, and you might be in prison prison and everything might seem hopeless, but God's sovereign will for your life will prevail no matter what, no matter where you are. And yeah, that was just like so reassuring to me because I feel free, you know, to make decisions, and decisions that aren't necessarily, the book Just Do Something calls them non-moral decisions, like where should I live, where should I work, things like that. Yeah, I just feel more peace and freedom to make a choice knowing that if I move back out to Omaha, everything that I go through out there is still going to bring me to where God wants me to be. And that is so reassuring and so freeing because now I don't have to have all this anxiety about making the right choices and doing the right thing, because it is not dependent on me, it's dependent on God and his faithfulness and his character. And so yeah, that's what I've been learning lately. And so today I was reading in Exodus 2 and 3, and it's just like another example of God's sovereign will is, you know, God promised the Israelites that they would grow to be this massive population, and the Pharaoh at the time was worried that they would overthrow Egypt and whatnot. And so he, you know, had all these rules and stuff, but then one day he was just like, yep, like I can't, like I'm terrified, so any male baby that's born needs to be killed or thrown into the river, which was basically saying the same thing. You know, Moses was born and his mother hides him away and keeps him safe for a while, and then she's like, okay, like we gotta send him down the river, but she obviously doesn't want her baby child son to die, plus like God has plans for his life. So she puts him in a basket and floats him down the river. So Pharaoh's daughter sees the baby and is like, oh my gosh, she wants to take him in as her son, and she needs help from one of the Hebrew women to nurse and help raise the child. And guess what? It happens to be Moses' actual mom, and she gets paid for it. Like that's her job now, which is crazy because once again, God's sovereign will continued to prevail. And that's only part of it, because yeah, like everything was against Moses being born, living, and also delivering Israel from oppression. And it's crazy. So yeah, like I said, that's only part of it. I'm only on chapter 3, and like tomorrow I'll start chapter 4, and I know that God promised that Moses would deliver the Israelites, but I'm not there yet. But like I know that's gonna happen, and right now like everything's against Moses. So it's just like another reminder that God's sovereign will is good, and it's also not dependent on anyone or anything. Like he's gonna get his way, and his way is better for us, you know. And it can be really hard to trust God in that. It makes it a lot easier when you realize that like I don't have to do anything right and well to be blessed by him. And that's just like so good, because as humans, you know, we make mistakes all the time and we are far from perfect, and God doesn't expect that from us. So yeah, that's what I'm learning and reading about. And yeah, it's just been really reassuring after reading that book to now, you know, seeing concrete examples in the Bible and just feeling reassured from God that he will be with me, he will protect me, and he will bless me in my life, you know, no matter where I'm at, I can trust that he has got my back. So I just wanted to share that with you because this is definitely a big part of my life, and hopefully this will bring you some peace that maybe you've been looking for. But my interview is in like 15 minutes, so I'm gonna go get ready for that really quick, and then my sister and I are gonna head out and have a little fun girl errand shopping situation. Hello, this is future Amanda. I'm currently editing this vlog, and I think I've decided to have tomorrow's Vlogmas video be my sister and I's adventures out and just little clips from my weekend. It is currently already 7 or 8 p.m. and I really want to get this vlog up. I'm feeling a little bit stressed out already because the Vlogmas just started and we got home really late today. I'm feeling the pressure, and it's so funny because I have like 2 viewers. So for you 2 watching, thank you for being here. But yeah, I feel kind of bad because I don't want to just rush through Vlogmas. So I'll try a bit harder tomorrow. This is definitely first Vlogmas, so it's going to be a lot of trial and error. But I really appreciate you for being here, and I'm excited to see you tomorrow.